Lagos, the epicenter of COVID-19 in Nigeria, has seen a steep rise in the number of cases over the past few weeks. In an interview with Arise correspondent Leila Johnson-Salami, she sits down with the Lagos State Commissioner for Health, Professor Akin Abayomi, to discuss the fourth wave of the virus in Lagos, vaccinations, and learning to live with COVID.
Abayomi, many thanks for speaking to us today. Having less accurate knowledge about COVID-19 is said to be associated with a greater likelihood of catching the virus. Let's start off by speaking about vaccinations. Since March 2021, I believe that Nigeria has received about 33 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, of this number, only 4.7 million people countrywide are fully vaccinated. What percentage of the population in Lagos State is currently fully vaccinated, and what are the state's vaccination targets?
So right now we've reached our own target of about 3.4 of the Lagos eligible Lagos population. Mr. Governor set a target for 30% at the end of 2021 and 60% by the middle of 2022. So you can see we're way behind target, but there are a number of reasons for that. So first of all, Lagos has always been the epicenter. And so when we first got access to vaccines, there was a mad rush for vaccines. And I believe that most people who wanted to and needed to be vaccinated got vaccinated in the first, second, and third phase of our vaccine strategy or campaign. And those are essentially people that wanted to travel, people that were involved in corporate activity, our frontline workers. And so subsequently, the demand for vaccines amongst the population subsided. Despite watching international television and seeing multiple devastating waves around the world, we in Lagos seem to have managed our 4 waves quite well. And so I think that the general public have other priorities. They know COVID is there. I think anybody in Lagos now that says there's no COVID can't be living in Lagos. But they don't see the major impact. They can see that, over time people get admitted, a lot of people get sick, but they get discharged, very few people die. And so they're thinking, okay, I just need to get on with my life in Lagos and, if I get sick, I'll get better. So what we need to do in Lagos now to hit those targets is we need a vaccine strategy, which Mr. Governor is designing at the moment together with our technical team here to see how we can compel Lagosians, not in an autocratic way, but incentivize them, and then slowly tighten the reasons why you need to have a vaccine so that we can ramp up those numbers.
Now, the Omicron variant, when first discovered, was a cause for alarm because of how quickly it spreads. But this variant is proving to be a milder version of COVID-19. There are questions as to whether Omicron could provide the mass immunity that we're looking for globally. What are your thoughts on this?
So the original terminology of herd immunity, if you go back centuries, and it came from the animal kingdom. So when a virus infected a herd of cattle or a herd of zebras or antelopes, it would infect them, kill some, but those that survived were resistant to the virus. And so the virus would naturally peter out and that herd would continue to survive. But with modern technology, we're able to do both. Natural infection herd immunity and vaccine-induced herd immunity. And when you combine the two, you have a more robust level of defense against the virus. The only problem is that this herd immunity that we are developing as human beings against COVID doesn't seem to last long. Whether it's the natural infection or it's the vaccine-induced immunity, And when you have both working together, so you've had the natural infection, and then you have the vaccine, you get a real high spike in your immune system. But that spike goes up and comes down very quickly. The science is telling us that it probably lasts between 4 and 8 weeks. That means that immediately after you've had COVID, or immediately after you've had the vaccine, or immediately after you've had both COVID and the vaccine, you're protected for about 3 months. After that, you're losing your protection, especially if the virus is changing its genetic code. So your immunity won't recognize the new variants that are emerging.
There have been rumors about people who are getting eligible and authentic vaccine cards without actually taking the vaccine. Now, this may be people who may want to travel, but they don't necessarily want to take the jabs. First of all, what do you have to say about this? And then at the same time, what are the penalties that are involved here for people who may be found complicit, both within the Ministry of Health and also, of course, those who are getting these vaccine cards without taking the jabs?
So we've discovered, and it's not news to Lagosians and Nigerians, that there are all kinds of sharp practices going on around COVID management. If it's not testing, it's vaccines, vaccine certificates, and all kinds of things happening. Lagos has adopted a zero tolerance towards these kinds of sharp practices because our data is very strong. And it shows a very, very strong correlation between these acts of civil disobedience and our 4 waves. And it spans across the whole testing story, vaccination story, and compliance to isolation. So we've set up, through the laws that we've promulgated in Lagos, we've set up our mobile courts. And we know who's coming in, we know who's defaulted, we know where there are opportunities for you to get fake COVID tests or COVID vaccination cards. So we're performing sting operations all the time. We're calling thousands of people. If you don't do your day 2 test or your day 7 test, then you get a call. And I think most Lagosians now know that if you don't do what the government says, you're going to get a call. And that call, if you can't prove that you've been compliant with the guidelines, or you've been parading a fake certificate or a vaccine, that you're going to get pulled before a mobile court. And you're going to have to explain why you didn't do your test, or why you have a fake vaccine card or a fake test, and you'll be sanctioned. You want to travel for business or vacation or whatever your ticket is, hundreds of thousands of naira or millions of naira, well, go and get yourself tested. And you're on your way back, test yourself again at your expense. It's not part of the public health response. There's still a significant cost involved in managing COVID, but the government subsidizes and gives PCR testing to Lagosians in the public sector free. If you want to access the test in the private sector because you want to travel, then you pay that fee. But, Mr. Governor has asked us to revise and to look at the cost of testing, and we have done that very carefully, despite the fact that the reagents are going up and down because of the mutations of the virus. So it's not coming down as fast as we wanted to. In fact, sometimes it's going up, but we're looking for faster and more efficient ways of doing these tests within the consortium. And we're just about going to announce a reduction in the price of the PCR tests, even for those people who want to travel.
Is the spike that we've seen over the past few weeks due to new variants, or are there other factors at play here that we're not paying enough attention to?
So we've done our sequence analysis, and we've given that result to the Presidential Steering Committee. And our data shows that the predominant virus in circulation in Lagos now is Omicron. And it's very clear from our data, and it's also clear from the clinical picture of what we're seeing. The ability of this new variant to spread very quickly is what we're seeing in other parts of the world. It's not really going for the respiratory system. So the pattern is consistent. So our genetic sequencing is matching what we're seeing in the clinical arena. And the fourth wave, as we predicted, was going to have a very sharp uprise and a very sharp downstroke. And that's exactly what happened. So Omicron went through Lagos like a wildfire. And I think everybody recognizes that. At one point around Christmas and the New Year, there wasn't a household that didn't have somebody with a respiratory tract infection feeling awful, but not in respiratory failure.
It's been over 2 years now since COVID-19 was first detected. Is it believed that this virus is now endemic? Is it here to stay?
So I think just like the flu, human science and human biotechnology is advancing at an incredible pace. And, 10 or 20 years, we wouldn't have been able to manage COVID the way we're managing COVID now. In terms of the science around testing, the science around sequencing, the science around vaccine development, the science around new drug development. There are a lot of vaccines available. There are quite a number of drugs that we believe are quite effective against COVID now. In fact, Lagos has a stockpile of these drugs just in case we have a surge of patients that require hospitalization and require drug treatments. So Mr. Governor has approved that we have a reasonable stockpile of some of these very new innovative drugs in Lagos in case people are getting sick, and so we can intervene both with hospital management and with these new drugs. So I believe that science is getting on top of COVID. We don't want collateral damage, which means that we're spending all our time and our resources managing COVID and neglecting a myriad of other medical conditions in Lagos. And we've succeeded at doing that in Lagos. We've not allowed COVID to interfere with the management of the rest of medical conditions. And that's a big credit to Mr. Governor and his cabinet and the incident command system, that we've been able to isolate COVID, manage COVID, and maintain the management of other conditions around Lagos and make sure that only few facilities are concerned with the management of COVID, and the other 27 and 300 primary health, 27 general hospitals and 300 primary PHCs and tertiary facilities are busy doing what they normally do. The key is that we've been able to keep the economy open despite a pandemic.
Professor Abayomi, Lagos State Commissioner for Health, many thanks for speaking to us today on Arise News.
Right, that's all on news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rotu Sadiri, Michael Wilson, Adeso Amoro, and Aaron Akajala to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rotu Sadiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Yeah, so we begin with President Buhari tomorrow is going to be unveiling some really large rice pyramids in collaboration with the Rice Farmers Association of Nigeria. This is a picture from 2018 at a gala in Abuja. Gordon Emefiele was there. You had, of course, the president of the Rice Farmers Association on your show, Mr. Goronio. This was back in July of last year, so he's going to be there as well. And these rice pyramids are part of To a large extent, the success of the Anchor Borrowers Program that the central bank launched in 2015, which has gone a long way towards financing a number of farmers in order to increase their rice yields and their proceeds. Interesting enough, tomorrow, you just saw the ad before we came on air, the presidents of Benin Republic, Chad, Niger, they're all going to be there as well. FCT Minister President Buhari, Gordon Emefiele, Central Bank Governor. There's still the issue of smuggling. Let's take a look at a couple charts here. This is from the Thai Rice Exporters Association, Thailand. So they've got a pretty decent website that tells you year on year where their rice exports are going. You can see from on the far left, from 2012, they were exporting about 1.1 million metric tons of rice to Nigeria. All the way down to 2021, look at the reduction. It's 2,169 metric tons. You look at Benin Republic, though, and Cameroon, there's another chart that illustrates this a little better. So if you take a look at this second chart here, Nigeria is the blue bar. You can see as you go from left to right, the blue bar completely disappears, which shows you that exports, Thailand rice exports to Nigeria, they've gone down. Unfortunately, the orange bar is Benin Republic, and that's our neighbor. The World Bank estimates that about 80% of rice that comes into Benin Republic heads towards Nigeria. You can see 2019, 2020, 2021, the bar goes down. I think that's the result of the land border closure that we saw. If that will that rise as the borders have reopened, we'll have to see. But while Nigeria has recorded its success with the Anchor Borrowers Program, there is still issues with smuggling coming from the borders. As recently as November, we had rice farmers complaining about that. We go from rice to textiles. I want you to take a listen to Dhruv Kapoor. He is an Indian fashion designer. He's in Milan, and he was revealing a new line of fashion items for 2022 through 2023 in Milan. I want you to take a listen to his business model.
More than 200. In India, we have these very large textile manufacturing firms, like these huge corporations, and when they are producing their seasonal fabric, they normally would produce more than 200,000 meters of surplus, excess. So in case there is a rejection or there is a mistake in something, their orders don't get affected. And all that 200,000 meters is then discarded. It's just waste. So we are actually using that. Especially the printed pieces are all made from the surplus fabric.
Incredible stuff. I mean, India's textiles, they make them in such excess that he is able to use what they discard to produce. And if you come to Nigeria now, as we come to the tail end of the administration, you have to now ask yourself what gains have been made in our textile industry. India's textile industry employs about 45 million people. It's responsible for 12% of their foreign exchange earnings, 7% of industrial output, 2 to 3% of GDP. What gains have been made? As you come towards the end, we're talking about rice and agriculture. What about our textile industry? We've known, Rufai, you talk about the textile stats a lot, where we were in the 70s and 80s and where we are today. Finally, we go to Ghana. There's been some interesting stuff coming out of Ghana. Bloomberg wrote this article, Ghana debt moves deeper into distress as investors lose patience. Basically, bond yields on Ghana's debt, Euro bonds, have been climbing because investors have been selling the bonds. They are worried that Ghana will not be able to refinance its debt once the U.S., as expected, increases rate hikes. It will make refinancing troublesome. Ghana responded and wrote this, they put out this press release stating that, what Bloomberg said, there's a press release, a response to Bloomberg's article on Ghana debt. One thing I was interested in this press release, they said that Bloomberg said that our debt to GDP is 81%. That is factually incorrect. It's 78%, which I thought, I was like, what's the difference between 78% and 81%? But anyway, and then Bloomberg now wrote this article saying Ghana says Eurobond yields don't reflect economic reality. So look, the thing here is that Ghana's bond yields are rising, investors are selling. Very quickly, back in November, there was a hung parliament over a mobile tax. That they wanted to tax electronic mobile money transactions. Ghana has gone from a bank-led finance model to a telco-led finance model. MTN Ghana has been reaping rewards. Mobile money has become very big there. So they want to tax it. But Nana Akufo-Addo has a slim majority in parliament. And one of the parliamentary members said, hey, if we don't let this tax pass, how will we fund our government? And investors price that into the bonds, and that's the issue that we're seeing with them.
But it's a big problem, and I think Ghana should come clean as regards this. And that's why we keep talking about debt. Debt is really important, and I'm sure, hope some people that keep making the argument that, we don't have a debt problem, but we have a revenue problem in this country. I think they're taking notes.
Right.
Because Ghana grew this. It wasn't like this in Ghana before. A couple of years back, it used to be about 60%.
COVID spending.
COVID spending and the likes. And they grew this over a period of time. And when you look at it, they don't collect enough revenue to be able to hedge. And that's a big problem. And across developing countries in the world, once interest rates go up, then definitely there are going to be fluctuations. Currencies will suffer.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And for all the people too that are saying float the naira, hope you know interest rate going up is a way of America defending the dollar.
Of course.
Hope we all know that.
Indeed.
Because when they say, oh, the dollar is not defended, that's the true value. Is that the true value of the dollar? Hope you know as the interest rate rise will go up, it's a way of America saying we have to defend our own currency here. So for those that make the argument about floating all the time. Kudos on rice. We can reduce the number forward, but most importantly, we also have to drive down the cost of paddy.
Right.
It's really very important. More millers want to come into the business. Cost of paddy, and kudos. I just have to say, I mean, we've been able to cut out that bill. Just imagine, as of 2012, we were doing 1.2 million, and the forex that was going to that, and now we've reduced about 2,000. We've saved forex. We can do more, and we should grow our agri sector because it's got great potential. Yeah. Contributes about 26% to our GDP, one of the largest contributors to the GDP of this country.
Well, Tunu, you go ahead.
Okay, so the visuals here of the rice pyramids, I suppose that's supposed to harken back to the glory days of the ground-up pyramids in Kano. That significance is not lost on anybody, I imagine, from like the 70s, when Nigeria was massive exporter of agriculture. Unfortunately, in attempting to diversify the economy when crude oil came, everybody just, we all know the rest story. But yeah, so this is really good to see. And what you're showing is from Abuja. There are also rice and maize pyramids all over the country in Niger State, Gombe, Ekiti, and I'm particularly pleased about Kebbi because you might recall a few years ago there was a really disastrous flood wherein 500,000 hectares of land was lost to mostly rice farmers. They lost everything. So it's amazing that they've been able to really regroup in this fashion. So I cannot overstress how important this is and how cheering, how encouraging this actually is. I mean, good news for a change on a Monday morning. And I mean, yeah. But the point that you made, Grotus, is so important about smuggling. We saw that nice graph, didn't we, from Thailand. But our next door neighbors, just all you have to do is just hop on a bike and bring it across our porous borders. What has been done about that? It really is that simple. There are all kinds of swathes of land in Nigeria that are not policed at all. Anybody can just bring in the rice. Nigerians also have to be encouraged a lot more. What exactly is the point of eating locally produced rice? It has to be explained. This rice that you're getting from Thailand, we all like how it looks. I suppose there are less stones and what have you. But it could have been sitting in a warehouse in Thailand for years on end before it comes here. All of that needs to be stressed. We really need to market our own a lot more. But I think this is really great, and I have to commend, the federal government for that, the CBN.
The return of the pyramids, excellent news, good news, and quite also a vindication of the Central Bank of Nigeria. You recall that this Anchor Borrowers program have been criticized by some people who said, we were not covered by that policy. And on the basis of that, the Central Bank at a point had to come out and provide an indication that this policy was actually nationwide. And now with regard to rice, we have the rice pyramids. But it's not just about the spectacle, as good as the optics are. The fact is that there's been an increase in terms of production. Before the Anchor Borrowers program, we had about 1.5 million metric tons per hectare of paddy rice. But now it's gone up to about 5 million metric tons per hectare in terms of yield. And imagine the knock-on effect of that in terms of food sufficiency, the move towards food sufficiency, creation of jobs. The other thing that bar chart you indicator showed us is that in terms of rice import bill, that has gone down.
Yes.
It's almost flat because we have local production. What it means, of course, is that if you have good policy, you get good results for the benefit of all parties concerned. But the major challenge in Nigeria is the need to sustain these good policies, so that we don't celebrate on an episodic basis. It's just that I'm busy. I will have looked forward to the annual Rice Festival, which I understand begins tomorrow. I hope at that annual Rice Festival, jollof rice will be made, available as part of the way of celebrating. So, congratulations to both the President and the Central Bank of Nigeria. And to think that this has been done, this celebration is coming up at a time when we have had issues with COVID, and we have had issues with all kinds of other details. But in spite of that, this has happened. Ghana is insisting that e-levy bill, that's the name of the bill in Parliament that caused that problem, that it does not constitute any fiscal risk. So that their press release in response to the Bloomberg story is just a routine thing that the government does to reassure investors. And that's the whole purpose of it. And to say that, look, in terms of the fundamentals, the economy is strong. And even in terms of revenue, they're saying that they exceeded their own expectations with regard to non-oil tax revenue as of the end of 2021, and that the administration's growth without aid policy, is on a good footing. But the whole idea is to rebuild investor confidence, so that the assumption that there is a fiscal risk, with implications, for the larger economy will be an issue. So, thank you, Rotus.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rotus.
Thank you.
Moving on to more business updates, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning.
Very good morning to you. All eyes really on the China data this morning. I'll just run through it with you. So growth 8%, which actually, believe it or not, slightly below what people were expecting. But the real thing is the month-on-month growth in the last months of 2021, when people were worried about COVID. It looks as though it grew quite significantly, 4%. That's way above the 3.8% expected. However, there's always a however in these things, isn't there? The retail sales did not really come up to what people were expecting in China, so there's still being seen a slight slowdown there. China's central bank also cut medium-term interest rates as well for borrowing for companies. That's presumably which will help them. The rest of Asia Pacific fairly mixed. The only notable one, Nikkei, up about 0.5%. There's a fear, staying with China, that their anti-COVID policy or their zero COVID policy may disrupt supply chains. I think it's pretty obvious, isn't it, that that's what people are expecting, but there will be important ramifications also for inflation as well. That's how people are looking at those kind of figures there. As far as the United States is concerned, let's turn our attention. I normally at this kind of stage recap what's happened. I won't do that. Let's look forward because it's much more important. It's the earnings season. We're looking at Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Netflix, big transport stocks and the rest of it. It'll certainly shape up what the Fed is going to do. It'll also test the theory that there's a shift now from growth stocks into growth stocks, rather from tech stocks. And the Treasury market, there will be quite quiet this week because the Fed begins its two-day meeting next week on January the 25th. And it'll also be a very important time for investors to measure what effect inflation is having on the United States and its various companies. I'm going to take you to Afghanistan now. This is worthy of mention. This is a very sad story. The currency, we have noted it before, the Afghani, it's down about 25% since the Taliban took power. Its only rival for a worse performing currency is the Turkish lira, battered by Erdogan's unorthodox, if I can put it like that, economic policies. But this really is getting very serious now for Afghanistan. It cannot afford to pay for its imports. It's an import-dependent economy, and that means starvation for people facing very low winter temperatures as well. So a sad story from Afghanistan. As far as the EU is concerned, Russia, the pipeline, the controversy over Nord Stream 2 is actually fueling a coalition split in Germany between the Greens and the SDP. The Greens are against any cooperation with Russia. SDP, well, not for it, and they aren't actually saying a great deal. Olaf Scholz is the new leader in Germany. He's not saying anything huge about it, but it's felt as though there will be important things happening this week. Staying with the EU and Credit Suisse, its problems continue. Remember, it was the scandal about Greensill and also Archegos. Its chair, Antonio Norta Osirio, who was running Lloyd's banking group in the United States, has been forced to resign because he apparently breached COVID restrictions. As far as the UK is concerned, a big takeover bid for GlaxoSmithKline's retail business by Unilever. Unilever bid £50 billion for it over the weekend. GlaxoSmithKline have rejected it. The market feels as though they're waiting for an offer of 60 billion, and because make noises about failure to recognize the kind of value, but within those kind of sectors with that kind of scope of finance, that's what they're thinking at the moment. So £60 billion bid is what they're after. Again, UK looking forward this week to employment and inflation. That's important as well, because the Bank of England's monetary policy meeting is February the 3rd. It looks a long way ahead. It's not really, it's only a couple of weeks away, and the figures will be assessed by the committee when they're deciding whether or not to increase interest rates once again. As far as politics in the UK is concerned, it won't have escaped your attention over the weekend. I'm sure it was full of papers here. Boris Johnson is drawing up his survival plan. What kind of things is he going to come up with to even think about surviving? Well, it's likely that COVID restrictions will end. Maybe there'll be some kind of help for energy bills and greater military involvement in trying to curb the flow of migrants across the English Channel. But these are populist policies which he's hoping will guarantee his survival. Oil price looks as it's surging now. It's had four straight weeks of increase. This is mainly because of what's happening in Ukraine and so on. The crude price oil now at a 7-year high consistently. And finally, as far as cryptos are concerned, Tesla is starting accepting what was once a joke, cryptocurrency Dogecoin. It seems to be accepting that now. So that's a move forward to making cryptos maybe more mainstream. Who knows? Let's see. That's the global view this morning.
All right, two things. I'll start from America. Problems still persist in America. Energy inflation is happening. Real estate inflation is happening. And people are not going back to work. The job numbers not any better, keep increasing by the day, because the problem now is a lot of people have too much cash. They're sitting on that cash and they're making better decisions, and they don't want to work in the big corporations or work the jobs available any longer. So is it that the Thomas Piketty reality has come to play in the world? That's one. Number two, I'll talk about China. 8% growth doesn't mean China is beginning to cool off, with the reforms, with property companies like Evergrande and the likes, because a lot of people are looking and saying 8% growth is not good for China at this point in time.
Yeah, China, I think, I always say this, all we get is the official figures. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. I haven't seen the energy consumption figures. It's normally things which have an outside influence that you can measure China better. It's slightly less than analysts had been expecting, but it won't worry them too much. I mean, we'll get the official targets for growth later on this month when the president actually gives an idea of those. But at the moment, 8% growth, I think, is doing well. You're quite right, of course. Yes, they do have problems in the property sector. And who's saying that doesn't extend to other industries and other sectors as well? We did see a slight reduction in the cost of borrowing from the People's Bank of China overnight, or rather over the weekend, when they lowered the medium-term cost of borrowing. As far as the United States is concerned, I mean, yes, I'm sure that everything you say is absolutely right. I just was I'm getting slightly worried about the hold that Joe Biden's got on it, and certainly Kamala Harris as well. I mean, she made some crazy mistakes over the weekend in terms of figures that she was quoting. She just got them completely wrong. I'm not sure whether these people are actually up to doing the job properly. And remember that whatever we think about inflation, whatever you think about the US economy, I still think the most important thing is whether or not the infrastructure plan goes through. And at the moment, it's mired in discussion. And there doesn't seem to be much of a way out of that right now. There may be, but I do feel as though it's being watered down. And this Build Back America thing that Joe Biden was actually hoping for to boost his midterm election hopes, I think it is slowing down very, very slightly. So yes, you're absolutely right, I'm sure, about all the inflationary signs, but my worries are a bit more fundamental than that. I feel as though the president has not got a handle on what's going on.
Well, I wanted your comment on the contradiction that we're dealing with here. Two different individuals, two different situations. The chairman of Credit Suisse, his main offense, as was reported, was that he attended the Wimbledon tennis final in July at a time when there were COVID restrictions and he was supposed to be in quarantine. And last month, the investigation into that particular conduct was carried out, and that's principally why he has had to resign after 8 months in office, with the bank talking about personal responsibility and accountability. And then you have the other story, that of the Prime Minister who was involved in Partygate, who said the May 2020-21 event, he thought it was a work event, whereas it was a bring your own booze event. Now he wants to ban booze at Downing Street, number 10, and he's introducing what he calls Operation Red Meat. Isn't this a case of two different sets of rules, in the public sector and in the private sector? That's one. As for China, yes, interest rates. I'm more interested in the fact that China, the People's Bank of China, has decided to cut interest rate, which is against the grain. The Feds want to increase interest rates 3 times this year. The Bank of England, the other month, adjusted rates or promised to do so. Now, China has cut rate. Yes, GDP growth 8.1%, low retail sales of about 1.7%. But what do you think of that policy? Because it's like making loans cheaper for businesses. How far will China go, and how far can it go in that regard without necessarily, violating President Xi's common prosperity policy?
Well, I don't know how far China can actually go because I'm not privy to the discussions there. But yes, I think you're right. Certainly, whilst most central banks are thinking about raising rates, China is giving a help to what it sees as failing parts of its economy. What those are, I'm not quite sure. But certainly, if you look at it, if you were to dissect it, you'd look for companies that actually exist on medium-term borrowing, and then you'd get an idea of it. That seems to be what's going on at the moment. So on the one hand, you've got this growth, which it's not overheating, but then again, we'll see what targets the president actually wants when he reports back about that. I certainly agree as far as the difference between politicians, our prime minister, and the chair of Credit Suisse is concerned. I mean, there's no question. Look, it's much easier if you're the chair of a company and you do something wrong. The board is going to say, "Hey, resign." That's it. It's easy in corporate way. What our prime minister, whatever you think about him, is trying to guarantee his survival, I think is on pretty shaky ground. I think that most of the comment that I've been seeing over the weekend is saying that this is the way politics are and people don't like it. I mean, if you really want to know, people don't like to see politicians wriggling and going for their own survival and looking for scapegoats. They prefer them to take responsibility for what they've done and say, "Okay, I was wrong, I'm going."
Well, I don't know whether we still have a little time. I wanted you to comment on the Oxfam report on global inequity. 21,000 persons dying every day, 160 million people living on just about £4, and yet 10 people holding on to all the wealth in the world. And Oxfam is saying there should be a tax on wealth and riches. But in any case,
right. Good luck with the tax on the richest people in the world. You have to actually catch them first, and unfortunately, because their money is very, very mobile, you'd have to go from country to country to follow them. I'm very unsurprised at what this report is actually saying. Unfortunately, we don't like it, but it's a fact of life, and it's going to get worse unless these countries and their governments, most importantly, sign up to vaccination for everybody. That's the key.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate you. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adesua Moroa, the Queen, is here with us. Adesua. Morning.
Thank you so much, Rufai. Good to be here. Good morning. Good morning, Tundu, and good morning, Dr. Abati.
Good morning.
Good morning, Adesra, Queen of the Edos. According to Dr. Abati. It's Dr. Abati's thing. Stop hijacking it. And I won't either. It's an Abatism.
Dr. Abati has corrupted you all.
Yes.
He has corrupted you. Or he has infected you all. Yes. Well.
Good to see you.
Well, let's get to it. With the pandemic, good to see you two guys. With the pandemic, there's no one size fits all. And so you have governments all over the world deploying different strategies to cope with not just the health consequences of this pandemic, but also the economic consequences around the globe. So it's no surprise that while some governments are easing restrictions, some are reimposing lifted restrictions and putting in place targeted laws and rules, especially for the unvaccinated in the societies. For instance, in China, the Omicron outbreak is forcing the country to scale down Lunar New Year celebrations for a third year. Authorities are warning people not to travel during the festive period. In France, the parliament has given a final approval to a contentious vaccine bill aimed at restricting the movement of unvaccinated, like I said. But there you have it on your screen, the latest figures provided by the Johns Hopkins University. Here in Nigeria, 301 new infections and 8 COVID-19 related deaths were officially reported by the NCDC. And vaccination updates, shall we look at those numbers? About 12.6 million eligible persons targeted for the vaccination in Nigeria have now received a dose of the available vaccines. That's 12.6 million. And these figures are important because when you look at those who have showed up for their second dose, they're just about 4.9 million, or 4.4% of those targeted that have showed up for their second jab. Remember, Nigeria has an ambitious target to vaccinate 50% of its targeted population by the end of this month. So the clock is ticking. Can we meet that target? Authorities believe it is doable as supply is no longer an issue. People just need to understand the importance of this exercise and show up to get the vaccines in their arms. Well, talking about vaccines, the COVAX Global Vaccine Sharing Program has now delivered 1 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses. This was a target it set for itself last year. However, it's missing it now. And this is after the WHO says, despite hoarding and delays, especially caused by richer or wealthier countries, the COVAX has now met that 1 billion vaccination vaccine supplies across the world. But it also says that many countries are yet to meet its target. COVAX has reached 1 billion doses to 144 countries. However, we have those who have vaccinated less than 40% or less than 10% of their population across the world. And it's a very, very slow move to get the entire population of the world vaccinated against this virus that keeps changing very fast. Well, we finally saw the end to a nearly 2-week-long saga that captured worldwide attention over Novak Djokovic's decision not to be vaccinated against COVID-19 after an Australian court yesterday upheld the cancellation of his visa on health grounds. Djokovic landed in Dubai after a 13.5-hour flight after being deported from Australia. The unvaccinated tennis star was, however, seen hours later boarding a flight heading towards his home country, Serbia. So this drama with Australia is over. However, there are other Grand Slams. Roland Garros is in May, Wimbledon is in June, and we'll have the US Open sometime this year. Let me tell you that those 3 countries have different vaccination rules. So fingers crossed if Novak Djokovic would be granted access to these countries, or if the rules would change for him. And finally, I hate to put you on the spot, but I wonder if Dr. Abati, Tundu or Rufai will find someone wearing a face mask more attractive than someone who didn't. And this is why I ask you guys. A new study by researchers in Cardiff City say face masks might be doing more than just protecting you from the disease. They also make you appear more attractive. Although I must add that this research, this study is a small one. It involves about 43 women and men. So the scientists said that they can see it as a sign of being responsible and caring citizens for those who wear the mask. And so people perceive them as being more caring and more responsible, and so they find them more attractive. So beauty is no longer just in the eyes of the beholder, but in the eyes of the mask wearer.
That is such a funny story. And so it reminds me of another story I think you shared. There were some dating sites where people were being allowed to show that they've been vaccinated, and that makes them more attractive to people. The fact that I think it's the same theory, like you're that you're cautious about other people. But I think really, just generally, the tone, the mood is shifting away from a sort of understanding leniency towards people who choose not to be vaccinated. We used to call them vaccine hesitant, and now they're just called the unvaccinated, like the unwashed, the filthy hoi polloi. They're actually being targeted a lot more. I think patience is running out. Djokovic is just one example, and I'm really glad that entire debacle is over, because the longer it went on, the more excruciating it became. But you're right, God knows what's going to happen to his career, because he is still trying to be the greatest of all time, the GOAT, isn't he? He has one more Grand Slam to add to his huge tally. It's really sad that it's come to this with him. But Dr. Abati, well, I was going to mention it to you anyway, but Dr. Abati mentioned in the previous segment with Mr. Wilson about the chairman of Credit Suisse who had to step down because he attended the Wimbledon final, and it cost him his job. And then you now, just oppose that with what's happening in number 10, where Boris Johnson, somebody else has taken the fall. Allegra Strachan took the fall. Everybody is accepting blame apart from him. What is your take on that? And just the shift and the really lack of patience now with any kind of COVID misbehavior, as it were.
Indeed. Tunu, I mean, if you watch the news over the weekend and just see how things are shifting, and very typical of Prime Minister Boris Johnson trying to ride out these many scandals, even though we await the report of that inquiry this week. The Conservative Party leaders are now, shifting to opposition Labour leader Keir Starmer, saying he also had a drink during lockdown. So it's not a debate of who should be blamed. We did bad, you also did bad. No one is really taking responsibility. However, the people do need beyond apology from Prime Minister Boris Johnson, because they were not allowed to gather socially. They were not allowed to visit loved ones. They were not allowed to attend funerals. We had the Queen who lost her husband and had to sit alone during the funeral. Although Boris Johnson has apologized, but doesn't really stop at an apology.
Well, quickly, Boris Johnson, ahead of the report by Sue Gray, the investigation by Sue Gray, is launching what he calls Operation Red Meat. And under that Operation Red Meat, of course, maybe certain heads will roll. Definitely maybe Martin Reynolds and the Chief of Staff to be used as scapegoats. It's been speculated. And then those other populist measures that Michael Wilson referred to, including bringing in the military to lead security operations across the English Channel to check, migration there across the English Channel, and also ensuring that the Plan B, the Plan B framework is relaxed, so that people can have it easier in terms of restrictions, COVID restrictions. But the big issue is that also he has banned booze at number 10. So hopefully there will be no more downing of drinks during working hours, perhaps, or at all times in Downing Street. But how far would that help? Because people are actually calling for the Prime Minister's resignation. They're insisting that rules are rules. Yes. And you can see that the voters are already, the electorate are already responding. Labour now has a 10-point lead ahead of the Conservative Party. So all of this may have implications. Even if, Boris Johnson survives, he and his party having come down in ratings. Now, as for Djokovic, we're told he's in Dubai, and nobody knows where his next destination will be. He probably will go to Serbia, where is likely to get a hero's welcome. And the president, Vichuk, is saying that the Australians think they humiliated Djokovic, but that they humiliated themselves. And that the 10-day dizzying drama that we watched over the Djokovic affair is nothing but a farce. Well, it's not a farce. The point that has been established is that, look, rules are rules. Maybe the Australian authorities, Australia Border Force, also made some mistakes, and also Tennis Australia. But at the end of the day, it's been established that rules are important and there can be no prima donnas where this is concerned. Is this, a triumph for active anti-vaxxers? Yes, a crowd of anti-vaxxers consider Djokovic a hero, right? Would this inspire anti-vaxxers to remain resilient? Well, what happens to Djokovic hereafter may be instructive, because the Australian Prime Minister has said the 3-year ban that comes automatically with his deportation maybe, may not be up to that under the right circumstances. I guess the right circumstances will be Djokovic providing leadership and following science and policy by taking the vaccine.
All right, so real quickly at this one. For me, and thank you so much, Dr. Abati, for calling it out, a lot of downing of alcohol going on in Downing Street. That really got me laughing. But for me, it's the hypocrisy of the Conservative Party I can't stand. Because they have twisted the narrative now. Now they're beginning to blame the BBC as woke media. And now what they're saying in the press is, oh, there are other problems in England, so forget about the Prime Minister's problem. So they've twisted the narrative now with the Conservative Party and trying to gaslight people and point attention to other things and distract people. And also, shame on the parliamentarians and the lawmakers of the Conservative Party. I thought by now they'll have gotten the chair of the 1923 committee to start looking at a vote of no confidence on Boris Johnson. But guess what? They don't have the gusto to do that. They don't have what it takes. They don't have the oomph to do it. So shame on all of them. We got to go. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.